Welcome to Some Stories of Mine and the series This Happened Here. As we close out our finds of stories we unearthed in Indiana and Ohio, let us for one last time tell you about one of the most horrific stories as we walk through the airplane that one of our presidents, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, took his last trip on. Then, if you hang on, I want to tell you about the United States Air Force Museum as we walk around and look at these fantastic aircrafts. But first, let me tell you that story. I'm L.T. Bartek, your tour guide. I watched him walk my steps. He was a stalwart, distinguished man. His hair blew in the wind as he turned to wave at his well-wishers gathered at the airport on that afternoon of November 22nd, 1963. He was proud, and rightfully so. The people loved him and what he had done for the country and the world at large. He walked inside and sat in his designated seat. The rest of his party did the same. My unseen eyes watched him as he exchanged pleasantries with his wife Jackie, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, his wife Lady Bird, the Governor of Texas John Connally, and his wife Nellie. His security details and aides went and sat in their designated seat, and I watched them. I saw him take a file and began to leaf through it. He sat reading for a while. I sensed he was nervous, but an excited nervous. He was going to Dallas as part of a campaign tour for his re-election to the presidency. He was about to drive through the streets of Dallas, Texas to meet and greet his people, and I was happy for him. As the pilot started my engines, I focused on getting him there. The pilots guided me effectively through the air, and in no time I dropped my landing gear and ran the tarmac to the gate where he would disembark on Dallas' love field. He smiled as he walked down my steps at 11:45 a.m. with his wife Jacqueline Kennedy, who was in front. They joined the happy supporters waiting for them at the foot of the stairs. All seemed well as he got into the convertible limousine. As I waited for his return, at about 12:30 p.m., all hell broke loose on Elm Street in front of the Texas School Book Depository. Someone had killed the President of the United States. Someone had killed John Fitzgerald Kennedy. I was devastated. He was so alive just a few hours ago. The man who walked up my steps proud and strong earlier is now being taken inside in a casket. The sadness that hung on my walls on the trip to Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland, 10 miles out of Washington, D.C., was almost intolerable. I could not understand what had happened or why it had happened. Later, I took another president to Washington, D.C. Inside my walls, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in as the next President of the United States. It was a controlled chaos until I landed again on the D.C. runway. How things change, how things move on, how things fade into memories that ache. Now let us continue our United States Air Force Museum tour. CB likes to visit these sites because He was in the Air Force and likes to see some of the aircrafts he has worked on. I like to visit them, but for a different reason. Although I don't condone or believe in wars, these aircrafts helped our servicemen come back home alive and have been used to save many lives. Those stories are very interesting to me. As we walk through this, I will discuss it based on the information I got from Wikipedia. This information is licensed under the Creative Commons deed and free to share. I love Wikipedia and I get a lot of information from it. I also donate and urge you to do so. You can donate even less than $5. Because of Wikipedia, I no longer have to go to libraries to comb through dozens of books to bring you some of these stories. Now, I can appreciate that this may not be for everyone, but if you have ever wanted to visit the United States Air Force Museum but could not make it to Dayton, Ohio, here it is. I am L.T. Bartek, your tour guide. The National Museum of the United States Air Force, formerly the United States Air Force Museum, is the official museum of the United States Air Force, located at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, 6 miles northeast of Dayton, Ohio. The NMUSAF is the oldest and largest military aviation museum in the world, with more than 360 aircraft and missiles on display. The museum draws about 1 million visitors each year, making it one of the most frequently visited tourist attractions in Ohio. A little about the history. The museum dates to 1923, when the engineering division at Dayton's McCook Field first collected technical artifacts for preservation. In 1927, it moved it then Wright Field in a laboratory building. In 1932, the collection was named the Army Aeronautical Museum and placed in a WPA building from 1935 until World War II. In 1948, the collection remained private as the Air Force Technical Museum. In 1954, the Air Force Museum became public and was housed in its first permanent facility, Building 89 of the former Patterson Field in Fairborn, which had been an engine overhaul hangar. Many of its artifacts were parked outside and exposed to the weather. Through the 1960s, Eugene Kettering, son of Charles F. Kettering, led the project to build a permanent structure to house the collections and became the first chairman of the board of the Air Force Museum Foundation. When he died in 1969, his widow, Virginia, took over the project. Her determination, logic, and meticulous attention kept it on track, and the current facility opened in 1971, not including its annex on Wright Field proper. The museum has more than tripled in square footage since 1971, with the attention to a second hangar in 1988, a third in 2003, and a fourth in 2016. In October 2004, the name changed from United States Air Force Museum to National Museum of the United States Air Force. The museum is a central component of the National Aviation Heritage Area. On February 28, 2024, a tornado touched down in the Riverside area in Montgomery County, Ohio. The museum was struck by the tornado, causing damage. The base commander, Colonel Travis Pond, said that the damage was isolated to the southern side of Area B, damaged buildings including the Museum Restoration Hangar 4, Gate 22B, and other nearby facilities. Exhibits and collections. The museum's collection contained many rare aircraft of historical or technological importance, and the various memorabilia and artifacts from the history and development of aviation. Among them is the Apollo 15 Command Module Endeavour, which orbited the Moon 74 times in 1971. One of 4 surviving Convair B-36 Peacemakers, the only surviving North American XB-70 Valkyrie and Bruckscar, the Boeing B-29 Superfortress that dropped the Fat Man atomic bomb on Nagasaki during the last days of World War II. In 2010, the museum launched its 360-degree virtual tour, allowing most artifacts and exhibits to be viewed online. In 2016, the museum opened its 224,000 square foot 4th building, bringing its size to 1,120,000 square feet. The addition was primarily financed by the Air Force Museum Foundation at a cost of $40.8 million. The building housed more than 70 aircraft, missiles, and space vehicles in 4 new galleries: Presidential, Research and Development, Space and Global Reach, along with 3 Science, Technology, Engineering, and Maths learning nodes. In 2018, the Boeing B-17F Memphis Belle was placed on permanent public display in the World War II gallery. The aircraft and its crew became iconic symbols of the heavy bomber crew and support personnel who helped defeat Nazi Germany. Presidential aircraft. The museum has several presidential aircraft, including those used by Franklin D. Roosevelt, Harry Truman, and Dwight D. Eisenhower. The centerpiece of the presidential aircraft collection is SAM 26000, a modified Boeing 707 known as a VC-137C, used regularly by President John F. Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson, and Richard Nixon. This aircraft took President and Mrs. Kennedy to Dallas on November 22, 1963, the day of the president's assassination. Vice President Johnson was sworn in as president aboard it shortly after the assassination, and the aircraft then carried Kennedy's body back to Washington, D.C. It became the backup presidential aircraft after Nixon's first term. It was temporarily removed from display on December 5, 2009, repainted, and returned to display on President's Day in 2010. All presidential aircraft are now displayed in the Presidential Gallery in the new 4th building. A large section of the museum is dedicated to pioneers of flight, especially the Wright brothers, who I talked about in one of my last episodes, and who conducted some of their experiments at nearby Hoffman's Prairie. A replica of the Wrights' 1909 military flyer is on display, as well as other Wright brothers artifacts. The building also hosts the National Aviation Hall of Fame, which includes several educational exhibits. The museum has many pieces of U.S. Army, Air Force, and U.S. Air Force clothing and uniforms. At any time, more than 50 World War II vintage A2 leather flying jackets are on display. many of which belonged to famous figures in Air Force history. Others are painted to depict the airplanes and missions flown by their former owners. The displays include the jacket worn by Brigadier General James Stewart, P-38 Ace Major Richard I, Bong's sheepskin B-3 jacket, and boots, and A-2 jacket worn by one of the few USAAF pilots to leave the ground during the attack on Pearl Harbor, and President Ronald Reagan's USAAF peacoat. The museum completed the construction of a third hangar and hall of missiles in 2004. It now houses post-Cold War aeroplanes such as the Northrop Grumman B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, a test aircraft, the Lockheed F-117 Nighthawk stealth ground attack aircraft, and others. A fourth hangar was completed in 2016 to house the museum's space collection, presidential planes, and an enlarged educational outreach area. Previously, these collections were housed in an annex facility on Area B of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the former Wright Field. Because the annex was physically located on the base itself, museum guests were required to go through additional security checks before taking museum buses to the hangar. The museum owns other USAF aircraft, including former U.S. Army Air Service, USAAC, or USAAF aircraft that are unknown to other aerospace museums in the United States and overseas, as well as those on permanent static display at various U.S. Air Force installation and tenant activities worldwide, and at Air Force Reserve and Air National Guard installation across the United States. Most of these loaned aircraft duplicate aircraft exhibition by the museum. These other aircraft remain the property of the Department of the Air Force and are typically identified at these locations as being unknown from the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force. The museum staff has very high standards for the restoration and quality of care of loaned assets and has, in the past, revoked these loans when it was deemed that these other museums did not have the resources to properly care for an aircraft. This happened in the case of the famous Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress Memphis Belle. For an additional fee, guests can view aviation and space-oriented films in a large format theater interspersed primarily with other documentaries. In 2013, the Air Force Museum Theater was upgraded from IMAX to digital 3D. The renovation included a new stage, theater seats, and a new theater screen to support a broader range of programming, including educational presentations, live broadcasts, and expanded documentary choices. It also included a 7.1 surround sound system, audio devices for the hearing and visually impaired, and personal closed captioning systems. The National Museum of the U.S. Air Force completed a multi-phased long-term expansion plan. The Air Force Museum Foundation recently supported a major capital construction program that expanded the museum to the current 1 million square feet of exhibit space, with an addition of the fourth building that now houses the Space Gallery, Presidential Aircraft Gallery, and Global Reach Gallery. This new fourth building opened to the public on June 8, 2016. With the addition of new space, more than 70 aircraft that were in storage have been put back on display, such as the XB-70 Valkyrie. The Presidential Aircraft Collection is also back on site, having been moved to an outside location for some time. The new building's construction was entirely funded via private donation from several different sources. The museum is divided into galleries that cover broad historic trends in military aviation. These are further broken down into exhibits that detail specific historical periods and display aircraft in historical contexts. The Air Force Museum Foundation is a private, non-profit organization that supports the mission and goals of the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force. Now continue to walk with us as we walk around to see more buildings. I hope you're enjoying this, and I look forward to getting your likes and your subscribe. And if you want to see more, remember to click the all in the drop down screen so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. Now remember to take care of yourself and others, love each other and yourself, and I'll see you on the next one. Stay tuned for the rest of the video.